Hey, George, you hear me?
Yeah, I had to change the setting. I'm sorry.
All right, all right.
So the Facebook Live actually says 12 o'clock on the.
Oh man, I, it's live right now, so we're live.
Okay, well we're here.
All right, all right. So normally, this is your first time watching. I start out the show by talking about how I met the person, and then we go into their background before they were entrepreneurs, and then we go into what they're doing now. So George, man, I know George. Man, it got to be over 10 years. It was from the Latism days when we were on Twitter with the hashtag Latism, and you were one of the founding fathers of the website, blog, Puerto Rican content guy. And we just met each other a lot at events and different meetups, and definitely on the Twitter parties. I forgot what they used to call them, the
Tweet ups.
Tweet ups, yeah. And the audience was huge. The Latism audience was pretty huge, and I'm still in contact with a lot of those people from those days. So talk to the people about when your background, where you come from, how you got started in everything you do, and then we'll get to entrepreneurship.
So Miguel, first of all, thank you for having me here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is George Torres, and I love Latino culture. I was disappointed as a kid in the fact that our stories weren't kind of properly recorded in history books. So I created a platform called sofritoforyoursoul.com, which is one of the longest running Latino blogs on the internet. I'm in the process of doing some research, and I'm actually going to be putting out a video later today that kind of shows you the evolution of the website over the last 23 years. Wow. But I eventually leveraged the website into a couple of different properties, including Capicu, which is a cultural showcase in Brooklyn, New York. I co-founded Latism. I was an event producer for Hispanicize for over 8 years.
Yes.
I've worked with the United Nations. I've worked on projects related to the White House. I've done a lot of different types of work over the years in the cultural entrepreneurship space. So I'm very happy to be here and sharing some of my story with you guys.
Thank you. So talk to me about how you got into entrepreneurship in general. Like was the blog your first forte into entrepreneurship, or was that something, a path?
So I'm from Brooklyn originally, from East New York, and I spent some time, hanging out in the streets before I left high school and whatnot. So I did a couple of different entrepreneurial things early on in my entrepreneurial career, and those businesses are irrelevant now, so we're not going to talk about it. But I learned very early on that I had the opportunity and I had the gift of actually connecting people and being a bridge. So if you ever watched like the what was that? What's that Mel Gibson movie with Joe Pesci? Lethal Weapon. There's a guy, Joey Getz, right? Whatever you need, Joey Getz. That was kind of like who I was. I was teaching people.
The plug.
Yeah. So when I went to college, I went to college as an undergrad at 25, already with 2 kids and divorced. I had to sneak my kids in my dorm in order to make college work for me because I didn't have an apartment. So I used to sell mixtapes. I used to go to Harlem and I used to get these like DJ Clue and Doo-Wop and E. Kim and all these different DJs. And I would like basically sell mixtapes on campus. So I was always hustling something, but things changed for me when I actually ended up in class with Jose Salcedo from Trilo.
Yes,
my man Diony Concepcion from Mixtape Kings. And we all were in this internet class, this web design class, and we all created our first businesses, our first online businesses. We created in that class together, and it's really cool because we're still friends today.
Yeah.
So 23 years later, we're still seeing each other at conferences and giving dap and whatever. But we started pretty much all at SUNY College of Westbury in this room that's no bigger than this living room right now.
Crazy.
We were all back to back on computers coding. So it was a pretty cool moment back in 1996, 97.
Wow, that's crazy. It's funny because I end up working with Jose for a while, and then it's like, oh, you were his roommate or something like that. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I was his RA actually. I was his resident assistant.
RA, yeah.
So we were cool. He played for I think he was in a baseball team. I joined the frat, so we partied a lot together. So we were cool. We were cool friends. Yeah.
So all right. So move on to. All right, so that was your first foray into technology at all, right? Making a website. But then 2000s hit, that was the .com era. Is that when you started the blog?
No, I started the blog. The initial poetry blog that I started was in 1996 on GeoCities, which was a Yahoo platform later on.
Yeah.
And then in 97, I renamed it Sofrito for Your Soul. And it was my poetry journal. I was sharing a poetry journal online. But it quickly grew. So it went from being a poetry journal to being a place where other people would actually submit their poetry, to being like the hub of all the open mics in Long Island and Brooklyn. And then it just became international pretty much. I started taking in stories and recipes, and I started sharing different people's stories and stuff like that. And it just really blew up overnight. And my big break comes from two different things happened that would really pivoted me into business, right? One of them was I had a group of women who were supporting Latino Puerto Rican soldiers in Desert Storm, and whatever war was happening at the time, in 2000, 2001.
So they were creating content on the internet for soldiers, or they were going over
there? They were actually doing care packages for soldiers.
Okay.
So I had the idea of actually incorporating Puerto Rican candy like pilones and coconut candies and whatever, like the traditional Puerto Rican candy, into the baskets. And I partnered with a company called Antojitos.com, which was a very early stage startup in 1999 out of Junque in Puerto Rico.
Wow.
And we created these baskets of Puerto Rican flavor for the soldiers out in Afghanistan and in Iran, Iraq, etc. And then somebody found out about, like, the small newspaper from Long Island actually covered us, and we ended up getting approached by the Nassau County Museum of Art because they were putting together the first Latin American exhibition ever in Long Island, with works from Frida Kahlo, Diego Rivera, Botero, etc. And what they wanted me to do was, they knew I had like a captive audience of college students, and they wanted me to bring communities like actual Latinos to the museum to experience this exhibit. So,
and when was that? That was in the 2000s, early 2000s?
Yeah, that was like 2000, 2001. Like it's right during the Mi Gente time, like right when Community Connect, the Mi Gente, Black Planet happened. A lot of people don't realize that, like, we actually over-indexed on social media way before there was a MySpace. There was no, we went from AOL's Walled Garden, Prodigy, those types of online CD type of internet networks. The first step into the open network, into the open community of social media and social building, was really Community Connect, which was an Asian-owned business that had 3 properties: Black Planet, Mijente.com, and Asian Avenue.
Yes.
Those combined, I think they had something like 4 million people connected online, people of color online. Actually, crazy. It was just insane, and we had never heard of all the earlier, like, I'm trying to think of which websites were around back then, but like MySpace and whatever came before MySpace. There was a couple of
Friendster.
Friendster, there you go. Friendster was like one of the first ones that came in from Europe that people started jumping on. So Mi Gente did, like, really, like, when I tell you now, if you look at the space, especially the art circle in New York, if you look at all the big players, the Flaco Navajas, the Brujas of the world, all Tony Martinez from Urban Box Office and LatinFlavor.com. If you look at all these companies that are out there actually doing stuff in the tech space today, they all come from that time. We were all in college at that time.
It takes time, right? There's no such thing as an overnight success. It takes 20 years to be an overnight success.
And then you have somebody like, and this is a story that I literally just got off a text message with her, Judy, little Judy, which was the founder of LaMusica.com, which was the only Latina in the space at the time. There was no Latinas in tech at all, ever, nowhere.
Wow.
And she was the first exit and the most successful exit of the time. She sold La Música to SBS, which is La Mega, back in the early 2000s. And that story hasn't been told.
Wow.
That story has not been told.
I mean,
Latinas in tech right now, she's like the godmother of that.
Connect me. I want to get her on my show. I didn't even know that. I had no idea. So now, okay, you got into internet early. You started your blog. How'd you start making money online? What'd you do to become an entrepreneur using this digital skill set?
So banner advertising wasn't an option because even though there were a lot of Latinos online, getting market share was hard because there was a lot of lot of stuff popping up really fast, right? There was Hispanic Surf, there was Hispanic Magazine, Latino Links, there was Mia Magazine. You know, La Música was really strong with the music before Napster and before all the downloads became a thing. So there was a company called Barrio 305 that I actually had. I actually had the first video player playing urban Latin music in the early 2000s.
Well, like real player? You were using like real player?
It was like a real player. The company eventually sold the technology to Bright Cove, and they were the foundation of Bright Cove's success. Yeah. So it was crazy. Like, you know, we had free email on our website. So we had a lot of things that nobody had. Like I was miles ahead of a lot of different people. So I started making money by actually designing websites and web assets for other companies. That was my pivot. My pivot to making money was really web design and marketing materials, graphic design. At the time I was actually working at Kinko's, which is FedEx office now. Mm-hmm. So I was a store manager at Kinko's. So I used a lot of my downtime since it was a 24-hour operation. I would go into work and I had the biggest Mac in the world. So I was able to pump out work like crazy using my benefits from work. So yeah, and I got to meet and network with a lot of people. The guy who wrote the movie, the award-winning movie Machetero, he came into my Kinko's with the whole manuscript for the film before the film was made. And I read the whole script in one night because it was a Puerto Rican theme. And you didn't meet Puerto Ricans in Long Island. I literally read the whole manuscript as I was copying and getting it ready for him to pitch it to the studio.
That's amazing.
So I had these stories. Exactly. I had these stories, but a lot of it was rooted in poetry. So another way that I made money was actually creating poetry events in Long Island and music events. I worked with, I don't know if you know Pills.
Sounds familiar.
From the DJ conference, the DJ Mix conference.
I've heard of him, but I don't know. Yeah.
He's Jose Sarcelo's cousin or something.
Yeah, that's how I know.
I used to do parties with him with DJ Thread, rest his soul. And you know, we used to do these big events and parties, and I started developing conferences. So I started really young, really developing like spaces for us to have conversations about Latinos in the media, history. I had an opportunity of bringing Piri Tomas as a keynote speaker, the late Richie Perez as well, rest their souls. I got a chance to have them in conference and have people getting around in a storytelling circle and have real conversations with them about the young lords and about, you know, Puerto Ricans in the barrio back in the 70s and 60s. So I just always try to create spaces. And when I left college, the goal of Sofrito for Your Soul was to create spaces continuously, the kind of spaces that we would have in college, but in the streets. Like I really wanted to create that kind of learning environment in the streets. So I would constantly do pop-ups and do different types of events in the community to be able to have those same types of conversations for people who didn't have access to higher ed. So that's kind of really where that's where my heart is. My heart is to create spaces. So that's where Latism comes in. That's where Hispanicize comes in. And, you know,
That just makes me think about right now where we are with COVID. Like what is a transition? I see you're doing this Facebook group, which is awesome, and we got a bunch of people watching right now from it. What is the transition right now as we get through this pandemic for stuff like that to get that same feeling?
So you and I had a conversation before this, and I'm super hype about something that you're talk about. So I had a really good plan for this year, and I pivoted personally. Instead of being a practitioner and a social media ambassador and influencer, I stepped back from that a little bit, and I wanted to take on the role of teaching. One of my 3 words this year was pivot, write, teach. Those were my 3 words for the year. So I wanted to teach, and I had a plan. I had a couple of gigs lined up from South by Southwest to Hispanicize to other conferences that I was going to speak at, etc. And unfortunately, COVID put me in a position where I'm $80,000 in the hole. So I lost $80,000 worth of business. But my plan was, if I actually was going to count with that cash, I was going to create this group called the Siembra Initiative to be able to give back to small businesses that can't afford what my normal fee is, and teaching group settings. And that's been it's been something that I've been kind of like marinating with for a long time. I want to create this group. So then COVID happens, and I say, you know what? I got time now. I don't have the cash, but I have time. So let me
show. This show came because of the same reason. Like I've been wanting to talk about. I've been doing this, thinking about this for years. COVID hit. I was like, all right, every day COVID is on, I can do a show.
So basically what I did was I handpicked about 110 people, 120 people who I've worked with, mentored, collaborated with, that I really either support their movement, something. There's some kind of connection between me and everybody in the group. And I brought them into this Facebook environment so that we could have collaborative learning. So what that basically means is I'm giving them social media tools and training as far as what I know, but I'm also utilizing their skill sets to teach each other.
Yeah.
And that's the phase that we're in right now. We're in the phase right now where I'm starting to incorporate some of the people who are subject matter experts in the group and having them present to the group as almost like, it's like basically I'm not charging anybody anything for these classes. Mm-hmm. So it's an opportunity for them to give back and for them to better prepare everybody. So you'll be doing a session on startup and venture capitalism. Maria Nieto is going to do something on copywriting. We have Suzette Laboy, who's going to do some mindfulness and wellness. So it's very well-rounded. It's basically what a perfect company would be like in terms of training and development. But it's a completely open environment. And you work at your own pace because everybody has a different situation. Everybody has kids or they're working from home or whatever. So there's no restrictions in terms of like, you have to be at this class at this time or anything like that. It's
Griselda Moore says it's been such an amazing experience.
Griselda actually works with two of my my superstar clients. They're the bloggers out of Fort Lauderdale named Curly Curvy Passion. They're sisters, Andrea and Jennifer. And
they were always at Hispanicized, right? I think I met them.
No, they went for the first time last year in LA, like the second to last conference in LA. But I've been working with them for a while, and they're seeing astronomical growth. So Griselda is actually their intern, and I invited her into the group so she can, because I didn't want it to be a disparity between what they're learning and what she has to execute on. So I invited her into the group so she can get a little bit of my flavor. That way she knows where they're at, So since Griselda joined the team, they've been doing amazing. I mean, they're seeing 10,000 views on each story slide. I mean, really, they only have 2,000, 3,000 followers. So they're seeing 300, 400% viewership based on their following. So they're over-indexing on their content. And they're reclaiming conversations that they started in the space 3 or 4 years prior. And other people have ran with it and then not giving them credit. So they're starting to like have enough ground in the space or in the footprint to be able to reclaim conversations that they lost.
It's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I like the group. I think I already see a lot of interaction, a lot of feedback going through that group. So it's awesome. And we're on there live through this platform. So thank you everybody for watching. So all right, what would you say? All right, right now you got Siembra. I'm bad. Spanish. What else you got going on? Is that how are you going to start monetizing this time? Because like you said, you lost 80,000. I lost, speaking gigs too. I just took a little webinar yesterday about how to do virtual speaking gigs. I did one virtual speaking gig, so that's a huge opportunity they're talking about. So I'm trying to figure that out too. What's your current idea about entrepreneurship right now for you?
So for me, it's a little bit different, and I'm very fortunate that when I pivoted and I decided to write the book about my career and give people context about who I am, because I don't think people really fully grasp my space in the history. So I have to kind of enhance my storytelling in order to be able to tell that story. I decided to start working for an airline, for my favorite airline, who was previously a client, to be able to travel the world and just get better stories and kind of like not worry about money and benefits. So I kind of stepped back from making money, just to be happy.
Sure.
And just to be in a space where I can create. So I'm not really too worried about monetizing right now.
Okay.
I really want the people in this group to get to a place where their businesses are functioning, and hopefully some of those folks will be some of my future one-on-one clients. But I'm not doing it with that intention. Right now, the intention is to make sure that these people survive this time and that they're able to pivot in the way that they need to pivot, more importantly than anything. And then my book and my podcast, I also have a second podcast that I'm going to be working on with some big names. That we start taping this Saturday. One of the people from the I can't really say too much about it, but somebody's already on the group. Somebody's watching now that's down with the crew. And this is a guy that I respect. He's a big name in radio in the back part, behind the scenes. Yeah, and then another person who's like an uncle to me that's a major like movie star in Hollywood. So it's going to be an interesting podcast project.
He told me about it behind the scenes. It's going to be crazy.
It's going to be bananas.
I'll have you back on when you launch it for sure. Maria brings something up that you should talk about. One of the 50 most beautiful heroes. Talk about what happened there.
So I got reached out by people in Espanol, and they wanted to celebrate. They asked me if I was still working during the pandemic, and I had been working. I felt very confident in my airline's ability to keep us safe. I think they've done amazing jobs in taking care of the customers and us as staff. So I continued flying through the first month of the pandemic, and I had some really good feedback from customers that said they felt comfortable with me. I got a couple of internal accolades from the airline. So eventually, the people from communications reached out to me and asked me if I was interested in being one of the beautiful heroes, is what they call them. Basically, first responders in different spaces, people that are still working through the pandemic. So I got an opportunity to share a little bit about my story. So you could check that out at peopleinespanol.com in the Chica section, which is the Spanglish, Latinx portion of People in Espanol. So they celebrated me. So yesterday, People in Espanol dropped on Instagram. They dropped a picture of me.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
Yeah, so it was pretty dope. It's pretty dope. It was a great honor. I love People in Espanol as a brand. I've worked with them in the past. So it was, it feels good to come back home to a space where people appreciate you. And
congrats, man. That's big. That's big. I mean, that's tough. That's a tough thing to do. Like, still go out there knowing what was coming and stuff like that. So
yeah, and I'm actually flying out. I'm flying out right after, like literally after this. I'm heading out to work another pairing. So I'll be flying for the next 2 days and whatnot, and I'll be continuing to fly for the rest of this month. Next month is a little shaky because we don't know what the schedule looks like yet, but I'm planning to continue working because when you actually work in a position like that, and it's really crazy because I'm an entrepreneur and I've done really big things in the social media space, but as a flight attendant, I'm just happy to connect with people. I just love the randomness of who I meet and who I talk to on a daily basis. And right now is not a really good time for conversation.
Sure.
But right now it's a good time for empathy. And I think that what's happening right now for me, where I belong on the plane, is being able to comfort people and let them know that I don't have to be here. I have a whole career outside of JetBlue, and I'm choosing to fly, but I'm choosing to fly because I know I'm safe and I trust the brand. I trust my coworkers, and I feel safe because otherwise I wouldn't do it. Anybody who knows my story knows 10 years ago I almost died of a pneumonia. So I'm not the guy. I'm not the perfect person to catch COVID. I'm at risk. I'm a high risk person. So for me to feel that comfortable and be able to comfort people and be comfortable enough to give them a little bit of peace of mind, I think that's where I belong. So I really enjoy being part of that part of the story. You know what I mean?
That's amazing. That's amazing. People Magazine, great representative of the Puerto Rican people and then of JetBlue. So let's go into right now. All right. So we spoke about what you're doing. So what do you think for an entrepreneur? Because I know you do. We spoke about podcasting. So this will end up on a podcast. We spoke about that before on our call, but I watched your live this morning on the group, and you spoke about something. Why don't you tell the audience what you told us this morning on your platform about the podcast?
The value of every single, independent creator, anybody who creates video content, written content, podcast content, your value just went up yesterday. And I'm going to explain why. Joe Rogan, who's a popular TV host, podcaster, and MMA fighter, an enthusiast or announcer rather, just got a $100 million deal with Spotify to move his archives from YouTube to Spotify.
From everywhere.
$100 million for 12 years. For 12 years worth of content.
Apple was everywhere, right? So he has to take it all down and just have it on Spotify.
Exclusively on Spotify. That's just for the archives.
So it reminds me a lot of, and you spoke about this morning, it reminds me a lot of the Howard Stern situation when he went from
Sirius.
Sirius, yeah.
We went to Sirius. So Howard Stern is one of my heroes in terms of interviewing skills. He's one of the models that I have when I had to do my own interviews on my podcast and whatnot. Social Sofrito, if you want to follow. But one of the things that's really important about this deal is that influencing marketing has gone through a lot of phases and people kind of downed it or whatever. But it's the influencers that are creating the content right now that's putting people at ease. That are distracting people during this time, that are giving people access to mental health content, that is giving them access to education for them to be able to pivot their businesses. Like, we're the ones that are actually on the front lines in terms of the digital space. And this Joe Rogan deal, what it does is it creates a lot of opportunity, because one of the things that happened immediately after the deal went through was the stock market valuation of Spotify went up $5 billion. So $100 million that they invested in the Michael Jordan of YouTube and Apple, basically the biggest moneymaker for them, has just gone to Spotify, and they made $5 billion on the deal instantly. And I was watching a podcast this morning, watching a video on YouTube this morning, where the guy talks about the guy who bought the LA Clippers before they were the LA Clippers, when they were the San Diego Clippers. And he paid $12 million for it, and he sold it for $2.5 billion.
Yeah.
So it's the same type of deal. But what happened from that deal in the NBA, and what's going to happen in this deal for Spotify, is that every creator just became more valuable, because now YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, they're going to have to scramble to hold on to their talent so that they don't get caught up in some kind of exclusive deals.
So just like sports, like, he set the standard, he set the and now everybody's going to on that. I think YouTube made one of the biggest mistakes in history of the world by not allowing you to listen to YouTube as a podcast format. If they would have done that, none of these systems would exist, because
and Spotify is going to do the reverse, because Spotify is actually in the process of developing a video component.
Yep.
They're going after YouTube in a big way, and Google has the budget to fight them.
They do.
But Spotify is a beast. Spotify is a beast. They bought Anchor to bring some of the entry-level podcasters and bring them in and pay them. They started off a monetization from day one.
And Spotify is coming after Google harder than most people think, because they're even creating an ad platform for the podcast. So there's going to be a way for you as a business owner to say, I want to target these type of people, and it will automatically insert your ad inside of their podcast, and that creator will make that money at a higher CPM, or much higher CPM than YouTube. Much higher.
And when you look at what the direction voice search is going into, and when you look at, like I said, Anchor is taking podcasters that have never recorded a podcast before and paying them from day one.
From day one on your phone. You got to do a whole podcast off your phone, make $15 per 1,000 views. YouTube can make $1 per 1,000 views after you get 40,000 hours of listen time. Podcast one, you make $15 per CPM.
You know how long it took me to make 15 CPM back in the 90s?
Yeah.
You know how long it took me to make that?
And now it's almost impossible too. You got to have video on your website to do that kind of CPMs, if possible at all.
So I say all that to say, with people in the Siembra initiative, the people that are in my class, in my master class, and people that I coach outside of the class, it's a great moment for them, because this allows you pause. You have this pause right now to be able to really rethink your brand, and you don't have to do everything. Just do one thing really fucking good, and you'll be all right. Yeah. So that's the kind of messaging that I'm giving to the Siembra initiative. Like, you don't have to be on every platform. Go where your audience is, give them the best of you in that particular space, and then start branching off to other things as you see opportunity. Don't go out there thinking, okay, I have a Twitter, a Facebook, an Instagram, I'm on Pinterest. No, just focus on doing one thing really well and then expanding from that.
So okay, that brings me to a question, because that's the thing I struggle with, right? Like, even right now, this is being streamed to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch at the same time. And I just let it be out there, but I don't spend enough time on each of these, right? Right now, TikTok is the hot kind of up and comer. What do you see? Because I know Instagram is still the king right now, more than anything else. What do you see as in the next 5 years people should do to make sure they ride the wave of, you know how it is, like, you rode the Twitter wave, and then from there you were able to take that audience and keep growing it. What do you think is the current situation, and what people should do with social media?
On the higher end, on the people who understand the tech, really pay attention to virtual reality, and exactly that's how I meant too. The virtual reality, the augmented reality, and the voice search. are the things that you need to pay attention to, because attention is where it's at. Gary Vee says it all the time. You need to be where the people are. And as devices change, we 5 years from now, we may not be using laptops. It might be mobile only. So we have glasses, we have other wearables that are going to be happening. So we have to think ahead in terms of the technology of, if you're a business, how are you going to get the word out and hold on to the attention and to the CPM, right? The ad money. From a content creator perspective, you just need to be the best that you can. I've seen content creators go into different spaces and do amazing things. You have people like Kathy Hackle, who was like an augmented reality, virtual reality enthusiast, who eventually became counsel to HTC and actually, guided their programs. And
Magic Leap and all that.
She wrote their first book for Latina in augmented reality. So you have to think about, like, where are your skills transferable and how much more information can you get about those systems that actually run the money in the space that you're in. And that's really where it's at. But as a creator, just create the best that you can and just be exactly where your audience is and be connected. I said something yesterday in the group that got a lot of chuckles from people. One of my one-on-ones yesterday, somebody asked me, I just want more followers. So I did an audit of their account with them on the phone. And I'm like, you got 42 followers that say hi to you and like and comment on everything that you say every single day, and you never say nothing to them. Like, what do you want 10,000 people for? To ignore them?
Yeah.
No, you got to take care of those 42. And when people see that you're talking to those 42, they're going to jump into the conversation because they want to be part of that circle. They want to be in that conversation. So being mindful as an entrepreneur right now is probably the biggest thing. I've seen a lot of really great community projects come out of COVID, like what you're doing here, what I'm doing with Siembra. I see a lot of like really great stuff. I see Nancy Ruffin, pivoting and doing her YouTube show. So there's so many different people that are actually being very mindful, and it's all with the sense of community. So that's where we are now. Now it's going to be interesting to see how many people abandon these properties when the market opens up again and they're able to go back to work, or they're able to do what they were doing before, public speaking or whatever. I think virtual money is awesome. I've been doing virtual for 3 years. So this is not a stretch for me. Like, what's happening right now is not a stretch for me, because one, I'm used to working from home.
Yep.
Even though this has been a little tougher than what that was, but I've been doing virtuals for forever. I do universities all over the country virtually. Like, professors have me wire into their class all the time. And then I'm also doing some, on a side note, I'm doing some course development stuff for Columbia University, Teachers College. I'm teaching a social activism class. So I'm teaching people how to create campaigns for social activism, and for them to teach their students. So I'm teaching teachers.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you still have the entrepreneurial mindset. You have multiple streams of revenue. You have multiple things going on. Certain things are seed level. Certain things have already grown to something that can give you money.
I think the difference is that I'm not, I'm in a different place than I was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was really looking for the numbers. I was really driven by how much revenue I could bring to the table. Where am I going to be? What kind of deals am I going to sign? Now I step back from being a social media ambassador to a certain extent, but I did sign with Talento Unlimited, and Talento Unlimited is actually managing that portion of my career. And then I'm doing the free work with Siembra, and I have a couple of one-on-one customers that I've been working with for years that's going to stay there, and that kind of keeps the lights on, in that sense. But I'm not really driven by the money right now. I'm really driven by legacy. I want to put the book out. I want to tell the story of Sofrito for Your Soul. I want people to see how many different institutions I've had my hands in over the years. Because, I have really, really, really have shrunk myself to not make people feel uncomfortable, to feel like I'm bragging or anything like that. But I've worked in some really amazing spaces. I've worked on some really award-winning projects where they've walked away with awards, and I'm sitting in the corner saying, I wrote that, I did that, So there's a lot of that hasn't been told. And I think that the book is going to be a perfect vehicle for me to really expand on that stuff.
So as a person in this similar space, trying to write a book in this COVID times, what are you timeline looking at? Like, what is your goal?
So just before COVID, I had 5 chapters done. Wow. I decided to rewrite 2 chapters because I've been writing the book for a while. I started and stopped a couple of times. And the airline thing has actually allowed me more time to explore things. But the other part of it too is I'm trying to do a lot of research, because a lot of the stuff that I remember as an entrepreneur that was pretty new to the space, and I wasn't very savvy at the time. I wasn't, acclimated to the space. I wasn't your average Silicon Valley web.com.
Yeah, for real.
So I was detached from that space. So I was like out on my own. So there's a lot of parts of the story. Like, for example, I used to always say that I was the oldest Latino blog, like the first Latino website.
Sure.
And that's not true.
Oh, it's not. Which one was it?
It's not true. It's still debatable, but Hispanic Magazine, Latino Link, and La Musica are all platforms that were around before I launched to my .com. So there's a complicated history there, but I'm still the online magazine. And I think that as far as all the offerings that were out there, with the exception of La Musica, I think that I was the more robust because I offered the most. I offered poetry, storytelling. I had free email. I had a newswire. Actually, Manny from Hispanicize, his first company was Hispanic PR Wire, and they had a feed, a RSS feed that fed into my website. So I had like these press releases.
See, so what that makes me think about is the difference between La Musica, the girl did La Musica, and what you did. I think it was just a lack of understanding of the venture capital model, right? Because with that type of traction back then, you could have raised a few $1 million, brought on a team, and it exploded and then sold it 5 years later for 25 times that value, right?
I'm going to give you a spoiler from the book. I'm going to spoil something from the book. I got an offer from another Latino platform that emerged in 2001 for $650,000 to buy my website in 2001.
And you didn't do it.
You know why I didn't sell it?
Why?
It wasn't a business. I didn't know what I was selling them. I didn't have
yourself, basically.
I was embarrassed to tell them that it wasn't a business. They thought it was bigger than it was. They thought I had an office in Long Island somewhere where I was doing sales or whatever, and it was just me. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, nobody's going to buy a floppy disk or a zip drive with a website.
What you didn't know, though, and this is why. So I created this thing called MetaBronx, because what you didn't know back then was it was valuable. Because even though it was just you, you still had this platform that if they replaced you, they could have kept going. Where, at us, it's like imposter syndrome in a way, right? You're like, this can't be what they think it is, but in actuality, it's much better than you think it is. So it's
that's exactly what it is. So I was so embarrassed to be able to have, I didn't have a trust in the person that approached me about selling the website to tell them what it really was. So I just passed on the money. And the crazy thing is that would have been life-changing money for me at the time, because at that point, I had 4 kids. I had a, house in Long Island, 2 cars, living a married life or whatever. So that money would have been life-changing for me, but I was so embarrassed because I didn't have the business acumen to really have that conversation with somebody and say, I don't even know what I have here.
See, and that's lack of mentorship, right? There was probably no one that you could even ask.
There was nobody. You know where my big break comes? I'm gonna tell you where my big break comes, where I really get into the social media aspect. And we have very similar stories, is Gary Vee. I predate Gary Vee by a couple of years, but when he wrote Crush It, that's what really kind of like made me think like, oh shit, like this is what they're looking for. They're looking for that direction. They're looking for that connection to community. Like, I'm a personality above everything. Mm-hmm. And that's what that's the value of the website. Like, if you separate me from the website, it may not be the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into ambassadorship and marketing. And then,
there's a specific case that's very similar. Vlad TV. That's another one.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's literally named after him. He sold it. He sold it for a good amount of money, and he still has to stay on, and he gets a check on top of he got a big chunk of money. Plus, he has to stay on as the ambassador, and he gets a check. And he worked out a nice way to not have to be on camera, so he can do that probably from anywhere. And his system works. But I'm bringing this up because I think this happens to a lot of us. Really, like we're creating. Most entrepreneurs start out on their own by themselves, build something up. It looks bigger than it is. Then people come calling, and how do you maneuver that? So that's where I think mentorship. That's I lacked it too. I knew how to do all this stuff. I coded. I worked at all the big places, but I didn't know startup world.
Yeah.
I remember seeing people exiting and all that. I'm like, that was just a few lines of code. It's not even that crazy. But they knew the business world.
Yep.
Right. So
the only two exits I ever saw, and I didn't understand them. I didn't understand what raising funds was or anything. I saw the Little Judy acquisition of LaMusica.com. And I saw Tony Martinez from Urban Box Office sell LatinFlavor.com. Or get a round of investment, not sell it. He got a round of investment, which they burned through really fast, and they never had traction. And the reason why they didn't have traction, and the reason why there's a lot of websites that are in the Latino space that didn't get traction, was because the technology that we were putting on our websites didn't match the technology people had to consume it. So Urban Box Office, LatinFlavor.com could have been the first YouTube of the internet, because it predated YouTube by quite a few years.
Box Office, yeah, it was nice. There was a lot of animation. They had their own like shows, right?
Yeah. And then you had Dave Chaitel and John Leguizamo that now acquired Hispanicize. They had iCaramba.com, and iCaramba.com also had John Leguizamo put on his first animated short called Lugar Heights, which was a Puerto Rican Dominican version of the Boondocks prior to the Boondocks.
And it was just on that platform.
It was just on that platform exclusively. But again, the biggest issue was how many people can consume it, because a lot of people didn't have laptops. Laptops were not accessible. People were watching from work. So there was a lot of issues with HR and blocking certain services and video feeds and stuff like that. So even though people knew the websites and they knew who they were and they wanted to visit their sites, they just couldn't consume it the way it was intended to be consumed.
The volume couldn't get to the numbers that would make the business viable, right? So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, now we're not in that time, right? Like we are in the time where people like you. So one of the biggest things I learned in venture capital is I think 40% of all money raised goes to marketing. So think about that, right? So you raise $1 million, 400,000 of that has to go to marketing. But if you had a way of drawing traffic without spending marketing, that makes your startup a lot even more valuable, right? So with people like you that do social media, and then the audiences that you can build through social media, anything you create becomes more valuable because you don't need as much advertising money. Yep. So that's why I'm doing this show, right? This show is being created to grow everything I'm doing. I'll just draw traffic to it when it gets big, right? But at the same time, it helps me like catch up with people like you. Me and you, we always text like, yo, we got to catch up. Yeah. I was like, no, let's do it on camera and make content for both of us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where it came from. But what are you thinking?
I'm thinking like, again, this is the time for people to focus on a couple of key things. Financial literacy is huge, because understanding your personal finances to find out what you can invest in the business is huge. So there's something coming up on my website that's going to be addressing that. I'm teaming up with a company called Unidos Fin.
And Sofrito for Your Soul?
And Sofrito for Your Soul. We're going to have a bilingual financial literacy column on the site. So that's happening. I just got confirmation yesterday that we're going to be doing Comadre Coaching is coming back. Nancy Marmolejo is bringing back the old brand, and she's planning on doing something on the site as well. So I'm starting to bring together pieces that you guys in Siembra are actually making important for me again. And it's looking at the gaps that you guys have and then saying, okay, who do I find that could actually fill this gap? Can I get Miguel in here? Can I get, can I get Jose Salcedo in here? Can I get, like all the big players in the Latino circle? And then for anything that's outside of the Latino circle, have a few trusted people outside of our community that can come in and also help us. Because I think that's another piece, is that we're too proud to go out there and find somebody who's not Latino to come 100%. Into our space and talk to us.
100%. And one of the biggest things, even in the Latism days when we first started like just interacting on Twitter, the reason why I started getting into Latism was I was in the agency space, and I would always see that the Latino budgets were like 10% of the overall general market budget. I was always working on general market because there was more money, right? But I always remember thinking that the numbers are going to change though. Like, how is that going to make sense when the numbers are like Latinos are more than most people? How are you going to still keep the budget at 10%? So now, have you seen any differences there still to this day?
Some of the legacy agencies are moving towards multicultural.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because, and we've said it for years, Latinos are not a monolith. we're not one. You can't talk to a Puerto Rican the way you talk to an Argentino, or you could talk to a Colombian, etc. We have different languages, nuances. We have different cultural nuances. So a lot of it is going into multicultural. But before COVID, that was a little troublesome because obviously, like, how do we determine all these different audiences, right? There's no easy way to do that. Right. That's the one piece. But now with COVID happening and people downsizing, Twitter just announced that they're going to allow their Twitter people to work from home indefinitely, like forever.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All these different things are happening. So in my mind, when I talk to people from Talento Unlimited, which is my agency, that my creative agency that represents me, one of the things that we're thinking is that the monies from the company that they're saving in real estate and they're saving on different COVID-related adjustments are going to eventually go into marketing. There's going to be a big marketing push when this is over because everybody's going to start fighting for market share. One of the things that I tell the people in Siembra every single day is that what you don't realize is the person that was your competitor yesterday may not even be in the play.
Come back, no doubt.
They may not come back.
It's gonna be crazy.
I'm going to stick around. My agency is going to stick around because I've been virtual for 3 years. If I had to do this now, if I still had my office space in Brooklyn and I was shutting down my office space and I had to lay off my staff or whatever and make them virtual or whatever have you, my business would not survive because I didn't have enough cash reserve to be able to endure this.
Nobody has cash reserve for 18 months. Like even the airlines, right? Like,
but the fact that I was able to do virtual when I decided that I was going to live this like wandering Hibaro life that I designed for myself, I actually thought ahead and said, I really had that dream of being on a beach with my laptop and working and shutting it down after 3 hours and being good. So when I made those adjustments, I did it 3 years before this. So I'm going to survive this. There's no question. My name and my company is going to be out there when business opens back up. But a lot of my competitors won't. A lot of them,
I'm in the same exact boat. I started doing that in like 10 years ago. So the reason why I did it though was I'm from the Bronx originally, and I had the opportunity to bring my office to the Bronx for cheaper rent and to help the community with technology. Nobody wanted to come to the Bronx though.
I remember that. I was actually going to move into the same office, remember?
Yeah, I remember. So I was like, you know what? If nobody's going to come here, I'll just do it remote. And that was one of the best decisions ever because now I got people working all around the world. We're all used to this situation. It's pretty automated. Like you said, I could be working from a beach. But it allows me to do this show too. Like the show to me, one of the reasons why I want to make sure I talk about this, the podcast you're about to do, I think anybody watching that's in the entrepreneur space needs to think about creating something like this, a podcast, a show, because it allows you a situation. Look, I'm networking right now with George again. We're catching up. You're all watching. You're learning about what we're doing, both of us. So now we both possibly get some business out of it. And it's content out there where you keep our faces in your mind. And eventually you think, oh, I need to do this. Let me reach out to George or Miguel, right? So it's just such a benefit. It is work, but it's the benefit way outweighs the work.
And I'm going to say one more thing. And I know that this is going to be controversial for my peers because my peers have always complained about me giving away free content. I got a lot of that because our space is very small. So there's only a couple of key people doing the social media influencing type of thing that I do in the Latino space. And what I look forward to is if I find a competitor that actually went out of business because of COVID, I'm willing to open my door. I'm willing to open my door and say, look, let's partner. Mm-hmm. Let's collaborate. You get back in the game and we can do this together. Sure. And I don't think a lot of people are that forward thinking, honestly. I just know the space and I know how cutthroat it could be. Yeah. But I think that people need to rethink that. I think you need to rethink it and realize that, listen, nothing's promised tomorrow. If you guys have an opportunity to partner and to double up and double up on revenue and achieve something that neither one of you could do separately, then now is the time for you to start thinking about that type of unity.
100%. And it's just so much more valuable. Like if you think about it, I think part of the reason that happens, especially in our communities, is we've been put in this crabs in a barrel mentality where it's like we all got to fight for that same cracker, right? But no, the cracker is getting bigger and bigger and bigger as our audience grows, as these platforms grow. The money's getting bigger and bigger. And we go direct now. Now there's a way to go direct to this large Hispanic audience and make all that money. No middleman at all. So like the more people that partner, like people like us, we can make more of that money, and we could control our own destinies more. So that's part of why I'm even creating content like this. I want us to start thinking more like entrepreneurs, like business owners, not just employees.
Yeah, no, and I think it's the right time for it. I think that we need a couple of people to really make it, to be able to, for them to come and extend their hand and pull somebody else up. I think about the dream that we had when we first met. Actually, not when we first met, but when we first got together in real life, was during that Fordham University symposium, where we were a part of a think tank that wanted to build a tech sector in the Bronx.
Yep.
Like, that's really possible now. It wasn't possible back then. It was a dream. It was a great conversation, but that's a conversation that we should be revisiting, because Bronx could literally become Silicon Alley.
So we're getting so much closer to that. I got to catch you up on what's going on with Meta Bronx. It's a whole, probably another conversation, but we're getting closer to that. But there's still not enough community support from the individuals who live in the community, the politicians, the businesses. But now I feel like after this, they're going to know technology is not this thing that you can just leave over there and hope it never hits you. If you don't get involved in technology, your business is going to go out of business. Yeah. And right now you're seeing it, right? So we're doing some really cool things with Meta Bronx. I'll definitely, maybe we can have another conversation about it.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, man, it's happening. It's starting to happen. We got startups. We got partnerships with big venture capital firms. Our nonprofit now has 3 of the top venture capitalists on our board. It's moving in that direction. And we just partnered with a huge venture capital firm to give us a curriculum to help startups get venture capital, or just any type of money.
We definitely have to talk, for sure.
And I can give classes on Siembre and all that about it, because we're working with 12 startups a year to help them raise millions of dollars through these platforms and people. So that's working out. I know you got to run. So any last words for anybody watching that you feel like they should understand? How can they find you? Anything that can help an entrepreneur during COVID, and then anybody.
Yeah, I would say the Siembra initiative is in its infancy stages, but there's going to be a paid masterclass in a similar structure that's going to come up. It's going to be a cohort. That's going to be a 6-month cohort. And then I'm also developing a digital academy that has most of my signature courses, like Instaclass and Why Aren't You Crushing It and Elevated Influence, and all these courses that you know me for over the years that I've done as webinars. So I'm going to be putting all of these in one place so that you can do them at your own pace, and I could make residual income. I don't have to be there. I could just support them via calls and conference calls. So that's one piece of it. You can follow me on Urban Hero on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, sofritoforyoursoul.com directly. Understand that I'm available and I'm a resource. Reach out to me. Not everything is a transaction. If you ask me a question that I could answer off the top of my head, then I'm going to answer it. I'm not going to send you a bill for it. So just know that I have that open. Like I said, I give away a lot of content for free because I want to add value to your experience. I want to add value to what you're trying to build. And then based on that good energy and karma, we could build towards the future and then decide to collaborate at some point. But it's not always transactional with me. I think that's the biggest thing people need to know is, one, I have a lot of time because I'm flying around, and in between me flying, I'm at hotels and I set up office in the hotel and I work while I'm there. I don't do a whole lot of leisure when I'm away, especially now with COVID. I'm like really focused on content creation. So get in touch with me. Don't tenga pena. Reach out to me, talk to me about what you got going on. And if I don't have what you need, then I'll find somebody who does. I have a lot of peers that are doing amazing work in the space, and I could probably point you in the right direction.
So very cool, man. Thank you for coming on the show.
I appreciate it.
Catch up. We definitely gonna have to talk offline about this. How I can help Siembre. And anybody watching, thank you. Reach out to me the same way with George. Thank you for watching, and come back tomorrow. Entrepreneur Hour. Thank you.
Yeah, just peace, people. Peace. Take care.